The last day of death row. Inmate. Larry Micheal, the day a dog stopped an execution. Hello friends. Tonight we bring you one of the most extraordinary stories ever to emerge from Texas death row. For 15 long years, Larry Micheal sat inside a concrete cell, insisting to anyone who would listen that he was not the killer the state claimed him to be. Courts dismissed his words. Newspapers branded him a monster, and his appeals slipped away one by one. But when the clock finally began to tick toward his execution, Larry made a final request that stunned everyone. He didn't ask for a last meal, a final cigarette, or even a phone call home. He asked to see his dog, Luke, the German shepherd he had raised from a starving pup. What happened in those last hours would shake the prison walls and open the door to a truth no one expected. Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to Deathwatch Diaries for more prison documentary stories. Larry Micheal was born in Henderson, Texas, in the sweltering heat of 1990. His childhood was marked by chaos long before he could form words to describe it. His father, Raymond, was a man consumed by drink and violence. Nights in the Micheal household were punctuated not by bedtime stories, but by the sound of fists on walls, shattered bottles, and the bitter smell of whiskey. When Larry was barely 8 years old, Raymond walked out for good, leaving behind bruises on his wife and a trail of fear etched into his children's memories. If his father's absence should have been a relief, his mother's presence brought little comfort. Denise was a woman who seemed to live more for her own reflection than for her children. She spent what little money she earned on clothes and nights out, often leaving Larry and his younger siblings hungry and alone. For them, survival fell on Larry's small shoulders. By the age of 9, he was heating canned beans over the stove, walking his brother and sister to school, and whispering promises at night that he would always protect them. He became brother, father, and caretaker long before he was even a teenager. Larry's teachers noticed the signs. His clothes smelled of smoke, his eyes carried dark circles, and his body seemed too thin for his age. But in East Texas, poverty was common. Children like Larry slipped through the cracks every day, and no one intervened. He loved learning, particularly math, and dreamed once of becoming an engineer. But by 12, he was skipping classes to sweep floors or haul groceries, any odd job that might buy bread for the table. And when work wasn't enough, he stole. A loaf of bread slipped into a jacket, a carton of milk hidden under his arm. He didn't steal for thrill, he stole so his siblings could eat. It was during these years of desperation that he met Bernard Shaw, a boy who lived 2 doors down. Bernard also came from a troubled home, but instead of carrying responsibility, he sought chaos. He was wiry, restless, and always ready with a grin that promised trouble. Bernard pulled Larry into petty thefts and late-night schemes, whispering about easy money and daring adventures. Larry resisted at first, but hunger and exhaustion wear down even the strongest will. Slowly, he was drawn into Bernard's world. Then came Luke. One night, Larry found a starving German shepherd pup abandoned near the railroad tracks, ribs showing through its matted fur. Something inside him shifted when he scooped the shivering animal into his arms. For the first time, he felt a kind of need that didn't crush him. It healed him. Luke became his companion, his shadow, and his comfort. Raising the dog gave him purpose, anchoring him to something good in a world that often seemed bent on breaking him. For a while, life seemed to change. Larry stole less, worked harder, and even allowed himself to dream again. But Bernard was never far, always tempting him with one more job. One evening, Bernard came with a pair of earrings in the home of an elderly woman named Mrs. Debbie. Quick in and out, Bernard said. Nobody will even know. Larry hesitated. He remembered Mrs. Debbie, a retired nurse who had once given him soup when his mother disappeared for days, but desperation has a way of silencing conscience. Luke's food bowl was empty, his siblings' stomachs were growling, and Larry felt the weight of his promises pressing down on him. Against his better judgment, he agreed. That decision sealed his fate. The 2 boys slipped into the woman's house under the dim porch light. Larry's hand shook as he opened a jewelry box and found the earrings. He whispered urgently to Bernard, "That's it. Let's go." For Larry, the job was done. He fled into the night, clutching the earrings, thinking only of pawning them for dog food and groceries. But Bernard lingered. Hours later, Mrs. Debbie was found dead in her bed, beaten and assaulted. The town was outraged, desperate for justice, and eager to find someone to blame. The next morning, a neighbor swore she saw 2 black boys near the house that night. In the haze of prejudice, Bernard's pale skin vanished from her memory. Larry was the only target. By noon, deputies stormed into his apartment, dragging him out in handcuffs as his siblings cried. In his pocket were the earrings he had stolen. That was all the jury needed. Despite his pleas, I stole. But I didn't kill the courtroom, only saw a thief turned killer. At 20 years old, he was sentenced to death. Life on Texas death row is a slow-motion execution. Men spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells, watching the clock erode their sanity. Larry endured it for 15 years. He saw fellow inmates led away to Huntsville, never to return. He read books to escape, wrote poetry to remind himself he still had a soul, and repeated the same words whenever anyone would listen. I didn't kill her. The cruelest twist of fate came during his first year behind bars. Escorting inmates to the yard one day was none other than Bernard Shaw. His childhood friend, the boy he claimed had returned to the house that night, now wore the crisp uniform of a corrections officer. Bernard never acknowledged him, but sometimes Larry swore he saw the old grin flicker across his face. The guilty was free, the innocent condemned. And so, when Larry's execution date finally arrived in 2025, he had nothing left but the truth he had carried for decades and one final request to see his dog. Luke. Guards laughed at first, but the warden allowed it under strict conditions. 10 minutes in the yard. When the gate opened and Luke bounded forward, Larry dropped to his knees, burying his face in the dog's fur. For a moment, the prison walls melted away, but then Luke froze. His ears perked, his body stiffened, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. His eyes locked not on Larry, but on a guard standing at the fence, Officer Bernard Shaw. The growl deepened into a bark, sharp and undeniable. Luke remembered. The dog who had been with Larry since that fateful night recognized the scent of the man who had returned to the house. The truth had never left him. That moment unraveled everything. A guard named Ramirez reported the incident, sparking a review. New DNA testing revealed evidence long overlooked, a bloodied wrench found near Mrs. Debbie's porch. The traces matched Bernard. With that, the case collapsed. After 15 years, Larry was exonerated. In July 2025, he walked free, Luke wagging beside him, the two stepping into the sunlight, as if no time had passed. Bernard now faced charges, and justice, delayed for so long, finally shifted its aim. In the end, dear friends, the case of Larry Micheal stands as one of the most remarkable turnarounds ever seen on Texas death row. For 15 years, he lived under the shadow of the needle, branded a monster by courts and headlines, while the real truth hid in plain sight. What finally broke the silence was not the law or the system, but the loyalty of a dog who had never stopped recognizing the scent of guilt. Luke's growl sparked the chain of events that cleared his master's name and exposed the man who should have been behind bars all along. Larry's release is a story of survival, of faith in innocence, and of how justice can sometimes arrive in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for staying with us through this prison documentary. Don't forget to subscribe to Deathwatch Diaries for more powerful stories about the final hours on death row.